She doesn't fall for the loudest man in the room. She falls for the one who doesn't need the room at all. And 99% of men will never understand why. You've been told to impress her, to dominate, to chase harder, to speak smoother, to become larger than life. But what if the thing she secretly craves is the one thing almost no man dares to practice? Emotional self-possession. The ability to feel deeply, without reacting impulsively. The power to want her, without needing her. Most men leak their desire. It spills out in over-texting, in nervous laughter, in subtle jealousy, in constant reassurance seeking. And women feel it instantly, not because they're cruel, but because human beings are wired to detect emotional instability. Attachment theory shows that anxious behaviors activate caution in others. When you chase for validation, her nervous system doesn't relax. It scans for threat. But when you are grounded, when you speak slowly, when you listen without interrupting, when you don't rush to fill silence, something shifts. Her body softens. Her guard lowers. She feels safe, and safety is seductive. Psychologically, attraction deepens in the presence of emotional regulation. Research in emotional intelligence consistently shows that people who can manage their impulses and respond, rather than react, are perceived as more competent, more trustworthy, more desirable, not because they try to impress, but because their nervous system doesn't demand control. Think about the last time you felt truly drawn to someone. It wasn't because they begged for your attention. It was because they seemed centered in themselves, whole, not grasping. Women are no different. You see, 99% of men do this one thing wrong. They collapse their entire emotional world into a woman they barely know. They make her the center before she's earned the position. They project fantasies. They rush intimacy. They overshare their wounds too soon, hoping vulnerability will fast-forward connection. But true vulnerability is calibrated. It's not emotional dumping. It's controlled exposure. A woman doesn't fall for the man who reveals everything at once. She falls for the man who reveals himself slowly, like turning pages in a book she can't stop reading. There is tension in mystery. There is power in restraint. This doesn't mean being cold. It doesn't mean playing games. It means you have a life that doesn't orbit her. You have routines, purpose, inner structure. When she cancels a date, you don't spiral. You adjust. When she tests your patience with mixed signals, you don't argue. You observe. Observation is dominance in silence. Most men argue to prove value. Strong men don't argue. They assess. If her behavior doesn't align with your standards, you calmly withdraw. Not to manipulate, but because your boundaries are real. And boundaries are rare. Psychologically, boundaries signal self-respect. Self-respect signals high internal value. When you enforce a boundary without anger, without lectures, without ultimatums, her mind recalibrates. She senses you cannot be controlled through emotional chaos. That stability is deeply attractive because it mirrors secure attachment. Secure attachment is magnetic. In attachment theory, secure individuals are comfortable with closeness but not terrified of distance. They can hold intimacy without suffocating it. When you don't panic at space, when you don't chase after slight withdrawal, you communicate something powerful. You are okay with or without her. Paradoxically, that makes her want to be with you more. But here's the deeper layer most men never see. Women are emotionally intuitive. They don't just listen to your words. They read your subtext. They measure your pauses. They notice how quickly you reply. They feel the micro-tension in your voice when she mentions another man. If your sense of worth depends on her reactions, she will feel the weight of that dependency. And no one wants to carry someone else's emotional survival. When you build your worth internally, your presence changes. You stop performing. You stop calculating every text. You stop overanalyzing emojis. You speak because you want to, not because you fear losing her. That freedom is intoxicating. Imagine this. She takes longer to respond than usual. The old version of you stares at the screen. Heart racing, mind spiraling. Did I say something wrong? You draft messages. Delete them. Draft again. You feel small. Now imagine the grounded version of you. You notice the delay. You feel the flicker of anxiety, but you don't act from it. You return to your work, your gym session, your goals, your life continues moving forward. When she replies hours later, your energy hasn't shifted. That emotional neutrality is not indifference. It's discipline. Women love discipline in a man, not controlling discipline, self-discipline, because discipline signals strength, and strength signals safety. Let's go deeper. Women are biologically and psychologically attuned to emotional stability in potential partners. Studies on mate selection show that long-term attraction is strongly tied to perceived reliability and emotional steadiness. A man who reacts explosively, who needs constant reassurance, who loses composure under minor stress, unconsciously triggers doubt. But a man who can sit with discomfort, who can experience jealousy without acting on it, who can feel attraction without chasing blindly, triggers curiosity. Curiosity keeps her invested. Most men rush to define the relationship, rush to lock it down, rush to extract certainty. But emotional connection grows in space, not pressure. When you allow uncertainty without demanding immediate clarity, you create tension that feels alive. You become unpredictable in a calm way. Not chaotic, not manipulative, simply self-contained. And self-contained men are rare. Another thing 99% of men don't do: they listen without trying to fix. When she shares a problem, they jump into solution mode. They interrupt her emotional process. They treat feelings like puzzles to solve. But often she doesn't want solutions. She wants to feel understood. Empathy without control is powerful. When you respond with calm curiosity instead of advice, you validate her internal world. That validation builds trust. Trust builds attachment. Attachment builds attraction. There's a quiet strength in saying, "Tell me more," instead of, "Here's what you should do." And here's where it becomes even more psychological. Attraction thrives in polarity. If she is emotionally expressive, your calm grounding balances her. If she tests, your steadiness absorbs it. If she withdraws slightly, your lack of panic neutralizes the tension. You become the emotional anchor. Anchors are not loud. They are heavy, solid, unmoving in storms. Most men try to win arguments, but the man she remembers is the one who doesn't need to win. He listens. He speaks slowly. He maintains eye contact. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't scramble to defend himself at every perceived attack. He trusts his reality. And that trust is contagious, because when you trust yourself, she feels safe trusting you. But here's the truth that will challenge you. Emotional control is not suppression. It's awareness. If you numb yourself to avoid vulnerability, she will sense emotional distance. If you shut down to appear strong, she will feel the wall. True strength is controlled openness. You share parts of your story, but not as a plea for sympathy. You speak of your struggles without bitterness. You acknowledge pain without being consumed by it. You don't use trauma as identity. You've processed it. Healing is attractive. A man who has confronted his own wounds does not project them onto her. He doesn't accuse her of betrayal before it happens. He doesn't punish her for someone else's mistakes. He meets her in the present, not through the lens of past scars. And women feel that maturity deeply. There's also something else 99% of men fail to understand. Silence. Not the silent treatment, not emotional withdrawal, but intentional silence. The kind that makes your words heavier because they are fewer. When you don't overshare, when you don't narrate every thought, when you allow pauses in conversation without anxiety, she leans in. Silence creates space for imagination, and imagination fuels desire. You don't need to dominate conversations. You don't need to be the funniest, the richest, the most charismatic. You need to be emotionally congruent. Congruence means your actions match your words. If you say you value respect, you don't tolerate disrespect. If you say you're busy, you are actually building something. If you say you care, your behavior reflects it. Consistency builds trust. Trust builds emotional safety. Emotional safety builds attachment. And attachment, when secure, feels addictive. Here's a subtle psychological truth most people overlook. When you don't rush to fill every emotional gap, you allow her investment to grow. Human beings value what they invest in. If you are always overgiving, always over-explaining, always over-pursuing, she has nothing to lean toward. Let her lean. Let her wonder sometimes. Let her initiate. Let her feel the slight uncertainty of not fully owning your attention. Not because you're playing games, but because your attention is valuable. Value is not declared. It's demonstrated through behavior. When you walk away calmly from inconsistency, you communicate abundance. When you refuse to argue over minor ego battles, you communicate maturity. When you maintain your routines regardless of her mood, you communicate independence. Independence is seductive. And here's the one line that hints at the deeper psychology without offering you a shortcut. Regulate your nervous system before you try to regulate the relationship. Because the relationship is a mirror. If you are chaotic inside, it will reflect chaos. If you are steady, it will reflect steadiness. Women love the man who is centered in himself. The man who does not need to be chased because he is already moving forward. The man who does not crumble under delayed replies. The man who does not compete with every other male presence. The man who is present without being possessive. Presence is powerful. When you're with her, you're with her. Phone down. Attention steady. Listening fully. Not scanning the room for validation. Not thinking about how you're being perceived. Just grounded. That grounded energy is rare in a world of distraction. And rare things are valuable. Most men try to control outcomes. They strategize texts. They measure response times. They analyze social media activity. But attraction is not built through control. It's built through alignment. Alignment between your values and your actions. Between your emotions and your responses. Between your desire and your discipline. When you master that alignment, you stop trying to be chosen. You become selective. Selection changes the dynamic completely. Instead of wondering if she likes you, you begin observing if she aligns with you. Instead of fearing loss, you evaluate compatibility. That subtle internal shift transforms your energy. You become calm, detached, not cold, just self-assured. And that is what women love but rarely articulate. Not the loud confidence, not the flashy dominance, not the endless pursuit. They love the man who can walk away with dignity, the man who can feel deeply without drowning, the man who can desire intensely without losing himself, the man who can sit in silence without discomfort. You, if you choose to build that version, but it's not built overnight. It's built in the moments when you choose not to send the impulsive message, when you choose to breathe before reacting, when you choose to keep your word even when it's inconvenient, when you choose to leave situations that don't respect you. Piece by piece you construct emotional gravity, and gravity doesn't chase, it pulls. The truth is, women don't love complicated strategies. They love stability. They love emotional maturity. They love feeling safe without feeling controlled. They love depth without drama. And 99% of men are too busy performing to realize that the quietest strength is the most attractive force in the room. So the next time you feel the urge to over-explain yourself, pause. The next time you feel anxiety rising because she hasn't replied, breathe. The next time you want to argue to prove a point, reflect. Ask yourself who you are becoming in that moment. Because attraction isn't something you convince her into. It's something she feels in your presence. And presence is built from inner peace. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to be smoother. You don't need to be someone else. You need to be regulated, grounded, boundaried, alive. When you reach that state, something subtle happens. She stops seeing you as a boy seeking approval. She begins seeing you as a man who approves of himself. And that shift changes everything. Sit with that.